The Codpast.
Hello and welcome to the Codpast. I'm your host Sean Douglas, and this is the place where you'll hear right brain stories from interesting individuals. As per usual, in the first episode of the year, we like to take a look back at some of the best bits from the year before. So we start with episode 21, where Professor, poet and musician Benjamin Zephaniah shared some of his troubles in his early life and talks about how they became the perfect breeding ground for life as a poet. What prompted your decision to leave school at 13? Because potentially you could have gone to another school. I know you'd been excluded from 3, but was there not a choice to go to another school?
No. When I got kicked out of that last school, no school in Birmingham would have me. And so I had no choice.
You know, you didn't go to university, but I guess that time after school was your university of performance poetry, because then you became an MC or a toaster, as they called them in those days, and you were kind of toasting at parties and things. And I guess that's where you kind of cut your teeth on performance poetry.
Yes, but, you know, I don't tell people to be excluded from school because it will help your career. I get lots of people that come up to me and they go, "Oh, your life is so inspiring, kicked out of school at 13, now you got 16 honorary doctorates and you're the professor twice over, and oh, you're a friend of Nelson Mandela, oh, that's so wonderful, you know, you did that with no education, that's great." And then I'll say to them, "Okay, so take your kids out of school." Listen, most kids who don't go to school don't make it. That's a fact. It's not cool not having an education. It's education that leads to liberation. Being uneducated is not cool. Some people survive it, and I managed to survive it, but it's not cool.
And you almost didn't. I mean, you did end up in prison at one point.
Yes, you know, I ended up in prison, and in fact, when I got kicked out of school, a teacher told me that I'm going to end up doing a life sentence or dead. And I remember at one point, it looked like I was going that way. I mean, I was using gun to protect me. My boys, my gang, you know, were armed, and we were at war with another gang. And I remember thinking one night that it looks like my teacher's going to be proved right.
I've spoken to a few people who have kind of had a similar background to yourselves in an environment, because I think you said to me that at that point you didn't know anyone that didn't have a criminal record.
That's right, yes.
It was a surprise when you met people that didn't.
Yeah. I mean, everybody I knew had a police record, and if you didn't have one, the police would just give you one. You
know, people that I've spoken to, they say that when you're in that environment, it's almost like, I created a metaphor for it, where you're at a brick wall and there's 2 paths, and there's one path where you can go on the straight and narrow, but that's a path to being a nobody. You can take the path which is crime and it gives you status and something, and then there's this brick wall in front of you where on the other side is a legitimate path to recognition. But a lot of people have a lot of trouble breaking through that brick wall. I mean, what was your method to do that?
The first word that comes to my head would be tenacious. I mean, especially back then, writing was a very white middle class kind of occupation. So for a black kid from Handsworth, for the police record who's dyslexic and all the other things that were messed up in my life, to say that I want to be a writer, it's just crazy.
Was that something that gave you status amongst your peers though? Because writers kind of a bit...
No. Even after I was published, I remember kind of hanging out on a street corner with some guys. And, you know, this guy is bragging how many girls he's got, and another guy's bragging about, you know, his new Beamer car or whatever. And I said, "Oh, yeah, my novel's just been translated into 6 languages. They just laughed at me as if that doesn't mean anything."
Lastly, we've been listening to other people's music, and the last piece of music you chose was one of yours. So can you just introduce that for us?
The basic message behind it is that we are not bodies that have a spirit. We are spirit that have a body. And this physical stuff is only for a time. There is something greater than this, and I'm not going to call it God. I'm not going to say it's got a gender or anything like that. There is something greater than us. You don't have to pray to it. You don't even have to do that stuff. You just have to acknowledge it and just live your life as good as you can.
There is no politics, there is no politricks. There are no wicked Babylonian coming with gimmicks. There are no fighting men, so make me come again. No one is threatening you with bloody Armageddon. So make me flash me locks, there is no paradox. Cause when you get right down to it, there is no orthodox. There are no Englishmen, no Palestinian. Cause when you get right down to it, we have to live as one.
Next up was episode 22, where Hannah Lord talked about being diagnosed as a dyslexic in her late 20s and how after her diagnosis, people's perceptions of her changed. What was it like going to do the test? I mean, did you think you were going to come out as a dyslexic?
No, not at all. And it was, when I found out, it was actually really exciting because it was just hugely interesting to me. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be 30 next month, so I've come quite far in my life without it ever being an issue or being a problem. It just lets me understand a lot more about myself and why I do things, and it makes sense of a lot for me. So that's really exciting for me.
I mean, what was the response by people around you? You know, being the best speller in the family and stuff, and then kind of coming home and saying, "Hey guys, I'm dyslexic."
Well, it was just a bit. I think they thought I was just being weird again. Like, it's just, you get a mixed response from people. You know, my dad kind of going, "Oh, well, are you okay? Are you going to go into work?" Like, you know, it's like, no, I'm not. This isn't cancer. It's fine. It changes nothing. It's just, don't you think it's interesting? He's like, "Well, are you sure? They've probably got it wrong, haven't they?" It's like, no, it doesn't matter, Dad. I'm not, not missing a leg or something now. It's going to be okay. But there's just a lot of confusion, and again, because people knew me, they'd say, "Well, no, that's impossible. You can spell." And suddenly people think that people start looking at you slightly differently, which I found really surprising and really weird.
In what way?
Well, in the way, for instance, I'm going to expose myself as a real geek now, but if I was playing a game of Scrabble or something, because I'm that cool, with somebody and I beat them, they'd go, "How have you beat me? You're dyslexic." And they get really annoyed. They want you to be stupid when they know you've got dyslexia, because they see it as like this handicap, which I found hilarious, because these are people that have known me for absolutely years, but now they see me as slightly less because I'm dyslexic.
And I guess that brings me on to something. I mean, do you disclose that you're dyslexic? Do you think it's helpful? Because, like you said, people do look at you differently.
Yeah, I do disclose. I do, just because I'm actually really proud of it, which people find bizarre, because they don't know really how to respond, especially because I usually say it with a smile on my face. They're a bit confused. But yeah, of course I disclose. It's one of the things I'm really passionate about, is changing people's limited ideas of what dyslexia is. And usually I'll then go on to bore them to death about all the things I've found out about. Actually, it's not just about reading and writing, it's about all these other things. And it's actually really funny, the amount of people that I talk to about it. And I get kind of quite, excitable and whatever. And at the end they go, maybe I'm dyslexic.
In episode 24, comedian Michael Fabry talked about his time working in the job centre and the difficulty that many dyslexics have when trying to find a job that suits their skill set. I think you said to me before, the welfare system and the job centre, it favours people that are good at filling in forms.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. Often, this is the thing, when people say, oh, these people, they're on the take, they're on the fiddle. A lot of the people who are on benefits cannot find a place in society, in the modern working world. And the modern working world, having worked in the modern working world in various places, is sometimes considerably easier than filling out a tax credit form.
It's like what we were talking about before. You may maybe have great emotional intelligence and be street smart or have loads of common sense, but actually you can't put that down onto paper. There's no way to demonstrate.
One of the important things to understand is that when people have gone through the school system essentially failing the whole time, they look at the working world as a place where they are not welcome. So they don't know where to go, and the only place, and they think they need to go in low-skilled jobs. Now, actually, as I said before in my radio show, some of the low-skilled jobs are the hardest. I think the line I use in the show is, you don't want me working in your local supermarket, because people will come in saying, where's the very liquid Michael was working last night? No one knows. And tried the yoghurt section, I think was what I said. So the basic jobs aren't the place. Often the right place for them is sometimes
a place where they actually have
place where they can't get, because of this sheer cliff face of the bureaucratic nature of the lower end of the job. If you get the job, you generally start at a basic level, and the basic level is stuff you'll find really hard.
Yes.
So actually, the the dyslexic or the whoever, the right brain dominant person might be a really good manager, but they're never going to get the management job because they can't do the basic admin that leads to it.
Yeah.
But they should be a manager.
We went on to share this piece of Michael's stand-up that shows you don't have to be dyslexic to find reading confusing.
I read an article on the internet about China. I think the general public shouldn't be allowed on the internet. This article about China is interesting and everything, but underneath, all these people started leaving these little comments. This little debate started up. Now, I'd have taken part in this debate, but I was just scared of getting bullied by the horrible people who get on the internet. Admittedly, the first comment about China, the first person that got something wrong, they said, China's a terrible country. They make everybody have a child. And the person underneath that wrote, "You feeble-minded retard. It's the maximum of one child. Kill yourself." This is a bit much. If you were out tonight and someone said, "Is it true in China you have to have a child?" You wouldn't say, "Oh no, you've got that bit wrong. Kill yourself." But these comments just get mental. The one underneath that went, "No, China's a terrible country, it's a dictatorship, you can't trust them." Then the next person said, "Oh, that's a typically xenophobic response to a newly industrialised nation. Gone are the days where China consists of a few people growing rich on tea." And then the person underneath that wrote, "I love rich tea. It's my favourite biscuit." And the next person said, "No, you're wrong about China. It's a young and vibrant country now. The young people are taking over." Then the next person said, "Rich tea's your favourite biscuit." Are you mental? That's the most boring biscuit in the world. Then the next person said, "I think you're forgetting about Tiananmen Square." Then the next person said, "I've never tried a Tiananmen Square." "Are they any good for dunking?" The next person said, "Dunking was the worst leader China ever had."
In episode 25, we interviewed poet Luke Wright, who initially didn't quite think he fitted the Codpast mould. He soon realised he was a little bit more dyslexic than he first thought.
I mean, what do you think you would have been if you weren't a poet?
I don't know. I think I was thinking I'd be a journalist. That's what I wanted to be. But I felt there was too much. I was difficult, and I couldn't try and be a journalist and try and be a poet at the same time. Yeah.
See, I think you would have been a businessman of some kind, because like you write and you do books and all of that. Yeah. But essentially what you are is an entrepreneur. A lot of dyslexic are entrepreneurial, and it's because there isn't kind of this off the shelf career that you can have, or job. You kind of have to chisel out a Luke Wright.
And poetry particularly, there isn't. I mean, like stand up, there's a bit of a sort of ladder and there is career paths. You know, it's less so, and then more so in poetry now, but certainly back then there wasn't. I mean, you had to sort of invent your own way through it. That's definitely true. I would hate to be in an office trying to do the admin stuff and the forms, and you know, my ability to read forms is really bad. You know, given my ability to read complicated literature, you know, like I can handle that, but give me a form, and it's because I can't be asked to read it, or I start, you know, and it just sort of, I hate all that stuff and all the sort of crap I had to do when I was temping. Like I was bad at it. But yeah, I've been so good at school. Do you know what I mean? I really, you know, I excelled academically, but like, give me like those forms to fill in and all that sort of stuff. I just don't. It's just not something I do well at, and it's just not something I take pride in. And yeah, so I think actually, do you know what? I think I would, away from writing creatively, I think I would have done a job that required very little writing. Actually. I would have done well with a job that involves talking to people and ringing them up and convincing them to do things and putting on. That's why I think programming events makes sense. It's, you know, to me, I can just, you know, often when I do program events, I can't even be bothered to write the emails out to send them. Yeah. And that might be because I've spent, you know, best part of 20 years having living the life of Riley doing poetry, but you know, I'd much rather just ring somebody up and explain the idea of the gig to them rather than trying to write it all down. So unless I'm writing poems, I find the task of writing frustrating and irritating.
Totally dyslexic.
Yeah. And this poem that we're going to play now is called Kelvedon to Liverpool Street, and it's about my dad, who was a commuter, and particularly about my experiences of going up on the train with him for a couple of weeks when I was 15. And I guess it's the way we look at our parents and the way we look at ourselves through them. For 30 years, the buzzer went at 6. He'd take your breakfast in the lonely half-light, your milky tea, your marmalade and burnt toast, its carbon whiff lingering till we rose to fill the room with Cocoa Pops and squabbles. By then, you were at your desk in Bond Street, out of sight and largely out of mind, our lives a giddy whirl of girls or pogs. It wasn't till a summer job at 15 that I observed this quiet early ritual, the briefcase and the brolly, ever cautious, among the first cars in the station car park, which I believe gave you this sort of status. A short walk to the bridge and trains to London, perpetually ahead of local bods who went to work in Colchester or Ipswich. The fat bloke who sold papers and bad coffee and greeted tourists with a sigh knew you, a brisk nod, and your telegraph appeared. He always had the right change, which he liked. Then, on the platform, "Come, Luke, we'll wait here. Best place for a good seat." You were right, and I believed, as only a son can, that you and you alone had cracked the system. But coming back at 5:30 was different. Your straight-backed morning dignity was slouched. You looked a good deal older then, as you grabbed fitful scraps of sleep, this slow, sad lean towards the aisle until, before you fell, some well-worn sense would jolt you back upright. Sometimes you'd snore, and I'd shoot eyeballed hatred at flash young things that raised a sarky brow. Oh, Dad. Some days you looked as if you'd walked those tracks. Although it's only now I know that this was likely why you'd snip at me. How flimsy and silly I must have seemed next to the iron protocol of trains. I vowed I'd never work that daily rut. The trains I catch provide me varied views, but when I sleep on them, I dream of you.
In episode 26, actress Lauren McCrosty shared the story of how she found herself in Tim Burton's house auditioning for his latest feature film.
And then I got an email saying, "Oh yeah, could you go to his house? Could you go to Tim Burton's house? Like, could you just do that?" And I was like, "Yes, I can do that. I will be there. That is fine. I will put that in my diary." And I cancelled everything for 4 weeks, surrounding it. No, I'm joking. I did do it for I did protect and cushion that day. I was like, there's nothing is going to affect this day. This day is going to be perfect. And then I went there, and it was just after Halloween, so it was him in his prime element. There's still pumpkins everywhere. It was great. And then I was like, even if I don't get this part, I get to say that I've met him, I've been to his house, he's shaken my hand, he's looked me in the eye, and he said my name. And he said that he liked me enough to see me. I'm made for life. This is great. I was on such a high.
It's going to be your party story forever.
Yeah. And then I didn't hear anything for a bit, as you do. And then I got a missed call, and I was thinking it could only be this thing, because it was the only thing I'd really auditioned for over this period. And I was like, it could only ever be this thing. It's either another question about my height or, some weird question that casting directors ask. Very specific. What is your height? How long are your eyelashes? Just random stuff. And she said, "Yeah, I've got some good news for you." And I was like, this could only be. And then she said, "Yes, if they'd like to give you the part." And I was like, just screamed and yippied, and I danced for ages.
Well, were you ever on set with Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, no, I had a scene with him.
What's that like? Just standing there and acting across from
everybody
him?
Acted different when he came in, because he's Samuel Jackson.
Were you daunted or?
Oh yeah, there were a few of the first takes. I was like, I'm saying this because I'm remembering something that Samuel Jackson said about, I think it was Dustin Hoffman, and Dustin Hoffman had the same reaction that I'm about to say now. So it was basically my face was reading in the scene, I'm acting with Samuel Jackson, I'm acting with Samuel Jackson. And he was doing his bit, and there was me just not reacting or processing at all what was happening. I was just like, you're standing in front of me, this is really cool. And Dustin Hoffman, apparently, I think it was Dustin Hoffman, Samuel Jackson said that he was doing a scene with Dustin Hoffman, and they said cut, and the director came up to Dustin Hoffman and said, you do realise you just mouthed on your take, I'm acting with Samuel Jackson. And that's Dustin Hoffman. So if Dustin Hoffman's going to say that, I think Lauren McCrosty is going to be a bit wowed.
In episode 27, we spoke to MP for South Shields, Emma Lewell-Buck. She talked about dyspraxia and the advantages of being a dyspraxic politician.
So we talk about dyslexia a lot, and probably if you go through our back catalogue, you'll understand a lot about dyslexia, but it's quite often that people have dyslexia, they have a bit of dyspraxia, maybe some dysgraphia. You have dyslexia, but your dyspraxia is a bit more prominent. And can you just tell us a little bit about what dyspraxia is?
I find it sometimes difficult to talk about because I didn't get diagnosed until I was in my late 20s. And for me, it's just life. It's just who I am. So I find it really difficult trying to pare it down because for me, it's just things that are. Like when I got the diagnosis, my parents and all my friends read it and said, well, that is just you, though. There's nothing spectacular here. I didn't realise there was a name for it. So, yeah. And that's how I've always looked at it. But a lot of it is around spatial awareness. So I could be approaching, for example, somebody in the corridor and I will think they're closer to me than they actually are. Problems sometimes with basic things like left and right, problems with coordination, because it goes back to that your brain's wired a bit differently. So the world you're living in isn't set up for you because it's set up for the norms of other people. So you kind of often, I'm very clumsy. When I was little, everyone in the family would say, oh, Emma's just a clumsy bairn. Kind of, when I used to go to my auntie's house, I was never allowed a drink in the sitting room. I had to either go in the kitchen or the garden because you could guarantee it would end up all over the carpet, and she liked to keep her house nice. So, just little things like that. And you just grow up thinking, okay, I'm clumsy. It takes me a bit longer to do things, but you know what? So what?
And you described it to me before as it's as if someone's kind of taken your head off your body and you're looking at the world from quite a weird perspective. So your head will see something, but your body's in a completely different place.
Yes. Yeah, which, I suppose some people would say that when they're drunk, wouldn't they? So, again, it's not something that's insurmountable. And there is people who do have extremes of dyspraxia. Some people have verbal difficulty. I don't find that so much, but I do find sometimes if I'm under pressure or I'm a bit stressed, that words will come out a bit jumbled. But then people always just think, oh, it's just Emma, she's a bit quirky and she's a bit wacky, so we'll just let her get away with it. But it's not. It's just literally because they haven't formulated in my head.
Yeah. And I guess, you said quirky is one of those things, and you sometimes come across quirky. But I think as a kid, you were maybe quirky in kind of other ways. I mean, maybe your contemporaries were looking at Sunderland United and going, oh, I want to do that. You were looking at Prime Minister's Question Time and going, yeah, that's where I want to be. It's quite weird for a kid.
Yeah, and I was always obsessed. I think because at the time I was growing up, that was on the news a lot. I was always obsessed with Russia and the Cold War and what was happening there. And obviously a lot of my family are shipyard workers, so I was always watching them go off on strikes, so the Thatcher government. So things like that, even though I didn't identify that as politics, it obviously was. And my nana said to my mum once, you need to get something done about that kid. She's not right, Linda, because she doesn't do the things that other kids do. And I never did.
And being a dyspraxic politician, I mean, what do you think a dyspraxic politician brings to this place?
Well, I think it's that thinking outside the box again, isn't it? Just the other day I was having a conversation. I'll not get into it because it's really complicated. I was having a conversation. Someone said, but no, that's never been done before and it's against the law. And I was like, but we make the laws in here. So let's just change the law. Let's work to change the law. And then that no longer will be against the law, and then it will be possible. And you're met with blank faces and they're like, oh yeah, that's right. I think sometimes people forget that we have this amazing opportunity as MPs to do these things, yet sometimes people still think, oh no, that's never been done before, you can't do that. Of course you can. We're in the very place where you can do that.
And finally, in episode 29, CEO of I Love Dyslexia School, Angeliki Papa, gave us some tips on how to start our very own dyslexic love affair.
And if people with dyslexia can understand that maybe they have a harsh beginning because in the school they're not treated equally, but maybe this harsh beginning can make them so strong and so determined into proving the world their own unique talent and proving themselves that they are brilliant, that they can actually succeed and they can actually fulfill any dream if they're able to embrace challenges and difficulties as a gift. The only way to see the stars is when the sky is dark. So if you focus on the stars, every time, in every situation you are, try to turn it in favor of you. And if it's dark, look at the stars. And if it's bright, look at the sun. There is always there something to a positive thing, to flip the whole situation around you, backwards, so you can make it something positive for you. I know it's more difficult when you're experiencing it, and I think it's important to experience the loss in the beginning, and it's important to allow yourself to experience, negative feelings, but don't get stuck on these feelings. Get over them and make them the power, the force that you need, the fuel, the spark, the fire that you need to make something incredible in the world. And when I saw dyslexia, instead of being, I have to admit that in the beginning I was afraid of dyslexia because I knew that I was not able in the beginning to deal with such an incredible different brain, because my brain was different and because I didn't have any tools. Oh my God. My life is a miracle because I have turned my fears for dyslexia into a love affair. And if I have something to say to the people that they're listening and they have dyslexia, is to fall in love with who they are. Just for a minute, see themselves as complete, beautiful, colorful human beings. Forget about everything that they have heard outside of their brain about who they are. And just for a moment, embrace the possibility that they are a miracle. But it's only when you're ready to embrace your fear and make it a love affair. And this is how that was my recipe to every kind of success that I have developed, that I have experienced in myself, when I turn fears into love.
And that was a look back on a wonderful year of dyslexic radio heaven. As per usual, if you haven't already subscribed to us on iTunes, Stitcher or SoundCloud, then make sure it's on your list of New Year resolutions to do so. Also, if you haven't already given us one of those lovely 5-star reviews on iTunes, then make sure that 2017 is the year that you finally get round to it. It only takes a few minutes and it really helps the visibility of our show and helps us grow. So we've got some great podcasts, videos, articles and live events lined up for you in 2017. So join us on Facebook or Twitter to make sure you stay in the loop. You can also sign up to our newsletter or subscribe to our blog to make sure you never miss another bit of our great content. So until next time, enlighten your right brain at thecodpast.org.